Hello, and thank you for joining us on this evening's Ask Andrew show, Canada's first Facebook live streaming family law question and answer show. My name is Andrew Feldstein, and I'm the principal of Feldstein Family Law. We have offices in Markham, Vaughan, Oakville, and Mississauga in order to provide our family law services to our clients in really all parts of Ontario. And today, we are once again joined by our special guest, Anna Troitschanski. This is part two of a very special topic to me. It's my discussion about my own personal divorce. And during this show, like we did in the first part, we're going to flip the script a little bit where I'm the guest, even though I'm doing the introduction, and Anna will be the hostess. Anna is also a family law lawyer at our firm. She practices in all areas of family law and is a wonderful young lawyer. So Anna, I'm going to hand the reins of the show over to you now.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm excited to be back for part two and to delve even further into your experience. During our last show, we had discussed a lot of your experience going through the process as a family law lawyer, as well as the impact on your children. What I want to focus on today is more geared towards how your personal experience has shaped or changed the way you practice law, and what advice you have been able to share with your associates and clients by virtue of having gone through the process yourself. As lawyers, we're obviously trained to know the law and to understand the dynamics of the courts, the procedures associated with the practice of law. And when you practice this long enough, you start to understand the intricacies of the process fairly well. But I think that there is a significant difference between practicing law or practicing law after you've gone through the process personally. And what I'd like to ask you as the first question for today was, what was your biggest takeaway from your experience that you think impacts your daily practice? And what practical elements do you try and share with your associates?
Well, I think it starts with trying to understand what the clients are going through. Because when I was going through my separation, I had already been practicing family law for 20 years, which is fairly senior, even if I like to think of myself as young. And as you work through it, you realize where a lot of the insecurities are. I had 20 years experience of doing this, but I still felt nervous. I still felt stressed. And it's explaining to the lawyers in the office why clients react a certain way. Because we may see letters, we may see emails, and they're everyday events for us. But for the client, when they get the letter and it's, you receive a letter on a vacation day from the opposing side, and it gets you all worked up and you get upset because it put you in a bad mood and it's ruining your vacation. Well, when you're practicing law, you don't even think about it. Now, as an example, it's a small one. If a client says they're going on a vacation, sometimes I'll say to them, unless something has an urgent response, do you want me to hold off on sending it to you? You realize the level and the various places of insecurities there are, because there's two really big insecurities, I think, for anybody going through a divorce. And what is my relationship going to look like with my children when this is over? And where am I going to stand financially?
And was there something you learned from your personal experience that you look back on as a reminder when you're dealing with your clients? Any specific examples that maybe you can share with us?
Well, what I always look back on is the appreciation of the stressful time in your life. I like to think that I can handle a lot of stress. I probably can. I've been a successful family law lawyer now for 27 years. I think I learned how to cope with stress. But at the time, I remember there was a constant sense that I felt of failure. There's a constant sense of sadness, of loss. And you need to appreciate that can easily overwhelm you. And I remember the first weekend after I moved into my house, I'd moved out of my ex's home. And it was the first time I didn't have my kids, and I'd already moved in and been settled in. And I woke up on the Saturday morning and I thought to myself, what do I do? I had a 9 and 7-year-old. Every weekend for the past 9 years it had revolved around my kids. And it was really troubling because it was the first time in a very long time I didn't know what to do. All my friends were married except for one. And I remember I phoned him up and I said, "What do you do on a weekend?" And I was this close to deciding to go into the office that day. And I thought about it and said, I think if I go to work today, I'm going to become a workaholic. That will be my life. I will come into work every Saturday, every Sunday, and that will just be my passion. And that's really when I had an epiphany and it hit me that I have to make a new life. My weekends aren't just about my kids. I'm going to have the kids alternating weekends, and I have to figure out and I have to move forward. And as I dwelled on things, as time goes on, you also start to realize, and this is really important to say to clients when they're caught up in the woes me feelings that you inevitably are, because what you realize that you're missing at the time, it's not that you want to be with your former spouse, because the person that you married, whether it's 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it is, that person isn't the same person anymore. But what you're missing is you're missing that sense of a family unit. You're missing that every morning you get up and you see your kids, that every night you get the chance to tuck your kids into bed. And that family unit comes with being in one family unit, not in two separate homes. And that becomes a really important thing to appreciate in helping you move on, because you realize it's not about that former spouse, it's about that family unit that you had. It's not there anymore. It never will be there. And you have to accept it. And one of the mottos I kept on saying in my head to myself was, don't look back with sorrow. You got two kids, look forward. You have a lot of good fortune in your life. Focus on that. And that becomes really important to saying to clients when they get stuck, because they do get stuck. And they have to have an idea of how they're going to move forward. And a lot of that gives you a different appreciation, because as a lawyer, I never thought of those issues before. They never even occurred to me. But when I started to go through the process, it gave me a completely different appreciation from the emotional side of it.
And I actually remember that because I had my office right next to yours at that time. And I remember, given that I usually stay fairly late in the evenings to work, I remember us having several discussions where you were saying, I'm here later than normal. And, I got to figure out what to do now going home, given the new normal for me. So I very vividly remember these discussions that we had at the time. Is there any part of your experience that you have relayed to your junior associates in terms of advice for managing and relating clients? I know that I'm often in your office picking your brain on drafting separation agreements or, speaking to you about strategy on many of my cases. And often what I find, and I'm speaking from my own experience, is that you're able to give me very practical advice as to things that we may not always appreciate because you've actually gone through it. And I wonder if you can share with us any examples of that.
Well, there's a few different things you realize. I've now been separated a little over 8 years. So when I separated, my kids were 9 and 7. And it's funny, when you do an agreement, you work with your clients, you think about the kids as the age they are now at the time you're doing the deal. And everybody does this. So you think you're doing a deal for a 9 and 7-year-old. That deal, in terms of a lot of minutia, isn't going to work when the kids are older. So in your mindset, here's an easy one. You think when your kids are 9 and 7, they're up early every day. So to do an exchange, if it's Mother's Day at 8 a.m. or Father's Day at 8 a.m., you think, not a big deal. Go tell that to a 15-year-old to get up out of bed to go on a transition at 8 a.m. They're not going to want to do that. So you have to start thinking about an agreement in terms of there's going to be different stages of maturity for the kids, and the kids are going to be getting older, and their needs are going to be very different. And the problem you have when you get into this type of deal, or when you do a separation agreement, is there's different type of people. Some people, if you do an agreement, they will insist that every minute in the agreement will be in accordance with the agreement, and they will not vary from that, even if the kids have an issue with that. So the problem is, if you haven't worked towards factoring that particular issue of the kids getting older, the kids are going to resent somebody over it. So you can't always assume that people are going to have common sense, because not everybody is going to be reasonable. And the other thing I always say to you too is, I say, people may be on good terms now, but when there's a new boyfriend or new girlfriend in the picture, things may change and you have to protect them. I mean, one of the easiest clauses I sometimes say to my clients is a Super Bowl clause. I ask usually the father, it's a stereotype, is Super Bowl a big event to you? Yeah, it is. I said, well, maybe you want to put in the agreement that every year your child gets to be with you to watch the Super Bowl. Because right now, yeah, the mother may not care if they're not a football fan. But wait 3 years until she has a boyfriend and she wants that, it be stereotypical again, the son watching the Super Bowl with the stepfather. So sometimes you want to put clauses like that in to deal with problems that are going to happen. So there's small little things, but they do add up. And those kind of little things can be all about power and control as the kids get older.
We actually have a question from the audience. Do you believe that a lawyer that has personally gone through a divorce it makes them a better lawyer in terms of their practice?
I think it makes you a better lawyer. I think it's a good question, but it's something I wish I had never gone through at the time. I feel bad for my kids. It's stressful. It's not fun. 8 years later, though, I have to say I'm a very lucky man. I have an absolutely wonderful spouse at home. I was lucky enough to land on my feet again, young enough to be able to do that. I should say to people, one of the things that does happen is, don't think you're never going to have a chance to get over it, move on, and have an opportunity to become happy again. I know I certainly did. And it's out there. The possibility is out there. Life can get better. You just have to realize it may get worse for a while, but then there's a point in time where you can actually learn from it as a person, because you need to take stock and say, what was the mistakes I made? I obviously didn't pick the right person in terms of being suited for me and me being suited for them if I ended up divorced. So what were my mistakes? What should I look for in a person? Because I see sometimes clients come in for a second divorce, and you can see that the second wife is actually the same personality as the first wife. They stuck to the same type. They didn't do that introspection to say, where did I go wrong? And looking for something different. I spent a lot of time thinking about the fact, where did I go wrong, and not wanting to pick somebody who was just finding the same person over again. Because obviously, when I look back on it, we have two wonderful kids. But beyond that, my ex and I, we weren't a good fit for one another. I don't think I was a good fit for her, and I don't think she was a good fit for me. That's reality.
And related to that question as well, can you describe in a nutshell how your practice has changed if you were to compare yourself pre your divorce and separation as compared to what it is like after?
Well, you have a completely different appreciation for the emotional side of it. And that becomes very important, because when people want to get to settlement, they need to be able to deal with the emotional side of it. They need to understand it. I mean, a simple question I learned was, when I started dating after I was separated, most of the ladies that I would be talking to would ask me if I was divorced. And I would say, no, I'm separated. And they was like, okay, we don't want to go out with you. You're separated. You still have one foot in the door with your ex-wife. And my attitude was, that's not right. But I found that to be quite consistent. Why I say that's important is, I used to have clients who would say to me, I want to get divorced. And I would say to them, well, why are you spending the money? Why are you going to pay me to go get you divorced? And I didn't appreciate why. Then when I became separated, I appreciated it. Dealt with dating. It dealt with the fact, and I'm speaking from a man's perspective, I found that people wanted you to be divorced. And now when I have a client come in and say, I need to get divorced, I get it. And I know that my current spouse, she was thrilled. When I phoned her up and I said, I'm divorced, she goes, wow, that makes me feel a lot better now. I'm not with a married man. I had no appreciation for that kind of little impact that meant to people, and how important it was to feel ready to be able to move on to the next stage because of something like that. I looked at it and just said, well, you're separated. You solved everything in the agreement. It's done.
think there's also that level of closure that comes with that official document, and I think we often see it from a practical perspective of what do you need that divorce order for. But you're absolutely right. There's so much more to it from an emotional and a closure perspective that I think we've had a much better appreciation since you have gone through the process for sure. Uh, we have a question actually from the audience again. What, if anything, could you have done to keep your marriage together?
Uh, that's an interesting question. I can say we did do some marriage counseling. Uh, Probably not enough marriage counseling. I guess I'm pausing because I'm trying to be a little careful because I want to be even-handed in my answers, and I'm always cognizant that my kids can be watching this show or on the repeat. But at the end of the day, I would say that my marriage was probably doomed from the start. I don't think we're a compatible couple. And it's sort of ironic. I go back to something my parents said when I was dating my ex. They used to say they went to a wedding and they saw the bride when they were Jewish. So the rabbi said, you can kiss the bride now. And they always laughed because they went to this one wedding and the bride turned to their parents before they turned to the husband. And they said, what a shock that they ended up divorced. And my parents always made a joke of that and always told that joke. And then when I got married, that happened to me, the exact same thing. So maybe that was a sign early on, but I actually think had we gone for more counseling, I would have been happy to go for more counseling. I think at the end of the day, it would have been just banging my head against the wall and banging her head against the wall for something that just, we were two people that we should have really never gotten married, but for the fact we have kids. And quite frankly, one of the things that I take as a takeaway from it is what's the lesson we're teaching our kids? Because I think had my ex and I stayed together longer, I don't believe we would be teaching my children a good lesson, because the lesson we were showing them is a couple that really wasn't happy. We weren't a couple that was a cohesive unit. I like to think that in my current relationship with my wife, that we show my kids what a happy couple looks like, a couple that enjoys laughing together and can tell stupid jokes. And I hope that at my ex's home, they're giving the same kind of example to my kids of what a positive relationship looks like, because our kids primarily learn what a relationship is about from their parents. So the takeaway that I hope really happens, even though we weren't able to save our marriage, is that even though I put my kids through, and my ex did as well, a lot of stress, a lot of things that I don't think they should have ever had to because they didn't ask for it. But by the same token, I hope that we've been able to give them a gift of seeing what a positive relationship is. And I hope that my ex's relationship with her current husband is as good as my relationship.
It's an interesting point that you bring up, because very often, people talk about staying in a marriage for the sake of the children, and for the children to have a wholesome family. And I guess the counter argument to that is it suiting the children's best interests to be in a marriage where the mom and dad are clearly unhappy, which probably extends in some way to the children, whether it's by virtue of what's going on at home, whether it's the fighting, whether it's the energy at home. So it's a very valid point. I know in numerous discussions that you and I had while you were going through the process, and I was there when you were getting separated. You had spoke a lot about being worried about your kids and the effect that this had on your children. And I remember that was ultimately your focus on this is how your children were going to get through this, how your children are affected by it, and what you could do, if anything, to try and make this better for them. And I know that now you speak to our clients very frankly about that as well, in trying to center the discussions on their children and trying to explain to them the effect that some of their actions may ultimately have. I don't know if you're able to share any specific examples from your practice on that issue, or from your personal side of your separation, but I do know that was a big issue for you.
Well, it was a big issue. It still is a big issue. And what you're really trying to do is you want to be able to spare your children conflict. You want to be able to have your children see their lens of their new life in a way from the perspective of they should be happy and they should be able to be kids. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. I don't think anybody is. But we all hope to give the best life that we can for our children. I mean, this morning, this is a transition day, and I see my son as he's getting ready to go. And I thought to myself, I wonder how it has to be that child who has to go back and forth, has to have two homes. That's the part that really gets to me. But like I said, you have to focus on the positive. You need to focus on the fact that hopefully they're going to learn from your mistakes. And I have lots of discussions where I say it's really important that the person you're with ends up as your best friend, the person you can laugh with, the person you can joke with, because you want to make sure the person you're with is somebody that you actually want to be with, because I don't want them to go through the same issues that I had to go through. I mean, I think that's probably the same as every parent. And when you're talking to your clients, you have to focus on that. You have to say to them, you got to make this the best that you can, because that's the reality. And the ship has most likely, by the time you're in our office, has sailed on that relationship. And now you have to try and make it a positive co-parenting relationship if you can. You can't always do it. It takes two people to do it. And sometimes there's only one. And if it's only one, it's not going to work. That's just the practical reality of it.
Were there any mistakes that you made during the process that you strive not to have your clients repeat?
I would say one of the biggest mistakes I made is I didn't let my children really know who I am and who I am as a person outside of being dad. So what do I mean by that? When I separated with my former spouse, who is a stay-at-home mother, I made a point that during all of my parenting time, I would be there to pick up my kids after school. So that meant that whenever I had my children at 3:00, I was checked out of the office. And for the most part, I wouldn't do work that night because I was there to be with my kids all the time. And I think that was a mistake, because what took place from that is my kids, or I think part of the lens they saw is their mother did a lot of things for them during the day. You know, she would be the one to take them out and buy them clothes and do their camp shopping or their new school shopping and things like that. I wouldn't necessarily be the one to do it. She had time to do it. She wasn't working. And that meant in their eyes, they got to see their mother as the person who did lots of things for them, even though I was there when I would pick them up from school and on my parenting time. And they never got to see the sacrifices that I made for their life through my work hours. And even when my kids were in high school, I was still doing that because I felt it was the right thing to do. And then when COVID hit, now there's so much homeschooling and other things. My spouse, she does the school pickup. My daughter's finished high school now, but she'll pick up my son at the end of the day, which is now at 11:00 in the morning every other day. But she does the school pickup. I don't run home for that anymore. And in this past year during COVID, my son sees me coming home during my half time at 7:00 at night from work. He sees that I get up at 5:15 to exercise, followed by leaving for when he's home, followed by leaving for work early. He sees me putting in 11, 12 hours a day of work. I think that's allowed him to develop a whole different form of respect for me, that my work is serious, that my contribution to the family is significant. And he gets a better idea of who I am and what I do for the benefit of the family than before, when he could see me, well, dad's there at 3:00, not a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, kids pick up on that. I've got a 9-year-old at home who completely understands that, and will make remarks. Mommy, you work really long hours. Mommy, I wish you could spend more time with us, but you do work very long hours. So I think they're very cognizant of what the parents do and what free time they have available. We have another question from the audience. What's the best way to explain a pending divorce to a church or a synagogue or a religious member of a particular institution?
It's
I don't
interesting.
know yes, how familiar, you
In
know.
my 27 years, I have to confess, I haven't been asked that question before. Um, I'm not a very religious person. As a Jewish person, I go to synagogue on the high holidays, and that's really about it. So I wasn't terribly concerned about telling the rabbi at my synagogue about my divorce. It just wasn't something that was high on my list. And quite frankly, I've never had a client say that. I think if you're that kind of spiritual person, you're probably more active in your church, mosque, or synagogue. Uh, and I think that means your spiritual advisor, you're probably closer with them. You may even been getting marriage counseling with them. And I think if you're that kind of religious and spiritual person, it may be a much harder thing because you typically religion frowns upon divorce. And the best thing I could say to you is better to be straightforward and honest, but probably let them know you've done counseling or that you are doing counseling with their assistance.
I know that with many of my cases or some of my cases where I have a particularly or a client that is particularly having a hard time with the separation, I have actually asked you on occasion to join a meeting or to speak to a particular client, one or two clients in the past, to try and maybe whether it's make them feel better or to help them understand that you two have gone through the process and it really can happen to anyone. And these emotions, they're normal and they're acceptable and part of the process. As I said, I know you've done it on one or two occasions for me. I'm sure you've assisted some of your other juniors in this regard. I know that you go out of your way to do this on a complimentary basis very often. What can you tell us about, and obviously you can't really divulge any specifics here, but maybe you can tell us in a nutshell, what type of advice do you give? I normally walk out of those meetings. I often let you have this meeting directly with my client because I feel that that's the best way to deal with it sometimes. But what can you tell us about what you say to our clients during these times?
Well, it's usually it's a client who is stuck, and it's recognizing why they're stuck. And it's like I said earlier in the show, when I had the realization that what you are missing when you separated is the family, and that the person you think you wish you could have been back with, i.e., your family, isn't that person, it's the idea of the family, and that the person that you're separating from isn't the person that you married. They're different people. And I try to say that to people so that they appreciate what it is they're missing. They realize it's not a possibility. That ship has sailed. And the other part of the message they have to realize is because of getting out of being stuck, you need to realize that there is a future. And realizing that there is a future is an important thing. So I've had many discussions with clients to let them know that there can be a future. You can find another person. You can move on. And I tell them, like, I really believe I met the most wonderful woman. I feel like I'm the luckiest man there is that I met her, that I got a second chance in life. I met her when I was 44 years old. It was about, I guess, 6, 7 months after I separated. And I try to say to people, if I got that lucky to find an absolutely wonderful, loving woman, I mean, I had no idea what a relationship could really be like. She's an amazing cook. She takes care of me in every which way. She's hardworking. She loves me. You know, she would do anything for my kids. And I feel incredibly fortunate. And I try to say to people, if this happened to me, it can happen to you. And it will happen to you. And people need to sometimes hear that you can move on, start over, build a new life, and be happy. Because when you're in that stage, you actually don't think you're going to be happy.
We have another question from the audience. When going through your divorce, did you meet people that were also going through a similar process? And did it help, I guess, to associate with people that were going through a similar process as you?
I did, because one of the hard things, it's sort of like you're reinventing yourself. Because when you're married, your friends are other married couples. And when you have another couple invite you over, or now nobody invites you over, but when you have another couple say, come with us on a Saturday night to go out for dinner, you really don't want to. You know, your example earlier, Anna, I remember one Friday night, I had nothing going on and you invited me over for your Friday night dinner at your house. And I said, thank you. It was very polite, but I just didn't want to go over to other people's homes and feel like, okay, here's a sympathy invite. It's not who I am. It's not what I want to be. So you have to find new friends. You have to make new friends. And those people are generally in the single world then, because those are people, if you want to go out on a Friday night, you go out on a Friday night or on a Saturday night. And so you start to develop new friends that way. And generally speaking, especially if they're fresh to this kind of thing, there's a lot more talking going on about it and figuring your way through it. So I hope that helps. I'm going to take back the reins of the show now, Anna, because we've actually gone overtime tonight. But thank you for being the hostess. You've done a terrific job. And
Thank you for having me again.
And I wanted to thank everyone for watching the show. Our next show will be April 21st at 8 o'clock p.m. If anyone has any suggestions on other topics that they may want, please send it in to info@feldsteinfamilylaw.com. And thank you for watching.